It's a very interesting thing to do. I like the idea of the room, because you can do that at the drop of a hat. You know, you go back to where you live and sit down and think, okay, I'm going to make this place better for half an hour. What should I do?
Hi, today we're going to talk about Jordan Peterson's Tidy Your Room. You've probably heard about it. It's quite famous. Jordan Peterson talked about tidy your room, make your bed, etc. And although it's popular and it's kind of obvious, there's actually a deeper meaning to be had here. On a superficial level, of course, it's about starting somewhere and incrementally building. But what does Jordan Peterson really mean by this? But in this video, we're going to take a deep dive in and see about some of the inner ramifications of what he's saying and how that can add a lot of depth to your understanding of the concept of tidying your room, and see how it can make a change in your life, and also how that refers back to society in general. So let's take a look.
That's in keeping with Jung's idea about erasing once you've got your mind and your emotions together, and once you're acting that out, then you can extend what you're willing to consider yourself and start fixing up the things that are part of your broader extent.
So what exactly is Jordan Peterson talking about here with this idea of tidying a room? Basically, we have a concept of the circle of concern and circle of influence, which was popularized by Dr. Stephen Covey. He was the guy who came up with the 7 habits of highly effective people. And his idea basically is that when we're very focused with external concerns, things like the lives of politicians, the world economy, the environment, and so on, we have a very big circle of concern, but our circle of influence, that thing which you can change, those things which we can change, is very small. And so we actually have very low self-esteem because of this. So when we're thinking of all sorts of things outside of our control, we effectively make ourselves weaker. We also have a thing called a circle of influence. And the circle of influence is stuff that I can do, like who I vote for, the books I read, the decisions I make in my daily life. Tidying my room, for example. These are things which we can do in our daily lives. And it actually empowers us. It gives us a sense of self-esteem. One of the challenges which we're facing in today's society is that people feel like they're a cog in a machine. They feel that if they weren't in their job, somebody else could do their job just as well or better. They feel that they are just in usually suburban areas, whizzing into a train, off a train, into a building, out of another building, one day following after another day, and so on. And so a great sense of disempowerment, okay? And so when we start focusing, like the tidy room concept, on things that we can change, it helps us ground ourselves in reality. And it helps us develop self-esteem, because we see ourselves achieving things, even small things, and that gives us a sense of meaning and worth in our lives. And so something as small as tidying a room can be very, very powerful. But let's see what else he ties in here. Is there something bigger than just the practicalities?
You know, I might say, well, if you were coming to see me for psychotherapy, the easiest thing for us to do first would just be to get you to organize your room. You think, well, is that psychotherapy? And the answer is, well, it depends on how you conceive the limits of your being. And I would say, start where you can start.
So what he's saying here is that if you were coming for therapy to Jordan Peterson, he would think it's a good place to start. That you have to start somewhere in order to make a difference in your life.
Now, I often tell people too, fix the things you repeat every day, because people tend to think of those as trivial, right? You get up, you brush your teeth, you have your breakfast, you have your routines that you go through every day. Well, those probably constitute 50% of your life. And people think, well, they're mundane, I don't need to pay attention to them. It's like, no, that's exactly wrong. The things you do every day, those are the most important things you do.
So what he's saying here regarding small things is not to ignore the small things. Around 50% of what we do are everyday, small, regular, repetitive activities. And these small changes gather up and become big things. Victim consciousness is probably the prevalent form of consciousness in the world today. And it's based on the concept that there isn't enough stuff to go around. And it results in all the belligerence that we see in the world today, this super hyper competitiveness, people cheating, standing over other people, and so on, because it's on the principle of it's a dog-eat-dog world. And the problem with this idea that there's not enough stuff to go around is that not only does it make people, say, in many ways be more aggressive about getting what they want, but also it makes a lot of people feel that they can't get anything. You see, if your circle of concern is very big and your circle of influence is very small, you start feeling like you have no power at all, that you're a victim to everything. And so you're going to have situations like, the husband or wife is not ideal. I should get another husband or wife. The house is not good enough. I need a better house. The job's not good enough. I need a better job. This job is ruining my health. This country, city, state is ruining my health. I have to change it. And so the person is externalizing everything and blaming everything external on their situations. How, of course, then do we reclaim our self-esteem and build ourselves back up to get out of victim consciousness? Well, then we have to get into the opposite thing, which is abundance of consciousness. Abundance consciousness is based on the idea that there's lots of stuff available and there's enough for us to get by. And to make ourselves appreciate and get into that method of thinking, we have to think in terms of responsibility for actions. We have to stop complaining. We have to start serving others, and so on and so forth. So in other words, the circle of influence is the way to get out of this. The bigger the circle of influence, the smaller the circle of concern, the more abundant we will be. So another consideration here in this lecture is the power of focus. Let's see what Jordan Peterson has to say about the power of focus.
Your mind is a very strange thing. As soon as you give it a name, a genuine aim, it'll reconfigure the world in keeping with that aim. That's actually how you see to begin with. Inference you might draw from that is, be careful what you aim at, right? What you aim at determines the way the world manifests itself to you. And so if the world is manifesting itself in a very negative way, one thing to ask is, are you aiming at the right thing?
So an interesting thing, if we're talking about the idea, are we looking at the right thing? And how is that going to affect our life? Is there's a Greek legend called Thanatos. And Thanatos is the embodiment of death. And of course we have Thanos, who is, the evil guy in those Marvel movies. Now, this leads on to an idea of Sigmund Freud's. He believes in these two instincts, which are Eros and Thanatos. So with Eros, we have things like procreation, social cooperation, survival. It's the life instinct. But Thanatos is the death instinct. So it's aggression, risky behavior, and relieving of trauma. Basically, it's like aggression turned inwards. It can be seen in some ways as a suicidal drive, or say people who like doing risky sports, for example. In a way, they're playing with the Thanatos instinct. And the Thanatos instinct is this aggressive instinct, but it's aggression turned inwards. And it's like a desire to reset things and start over again. So people these days, we're in a kind of post-modernistic era, and we have people like the Great Reset people. We have other people who are into apocalyptical ideas, whether it's religious apocalypse or whether it's environmental apocalypse, the climate disaster and so on, the climate crisis. And the problem with this way of thinking is a lot of people, because of their internal stresses and senses of frustration, because their circle of concern is so big and their circle of influence is so small, they are projecting their insecurities outwards, and they start thinking in the terms of a glorious revolution or a great ending and resetting of things. And the problem with that way of thinking is it's a bit like it's a bit like a country building up for war. For a while, people think it's a great idea to go to war, but once war starts, they're not so happy. And so the problem with these things is that if we focus too much on negative things in the world, not only are we going to be unhappy, but our contribution to the world is we're one other voice shouting for discord, one other voice shouting for an archaic solution to our problems. And the question, of course, is, will that archaic solution ever come? So we're living in a nihilistic era, and so a lot of people basically believe that nothing really matters, and there's an angst to do with that. And even a lot of religious people are hoping for some kind of apocalypse or some kind of event to restart things. And this is all part of this nihilistic kind of energy that's around the world at the moment. But the problem is you could push yourself in the wrong direction. Just think of Afghanistan. If we think about it logically, any country in the world is potentially 2 or 3 generations away from that anarchy and chaos simply by making enough of the wrong decisions. It's easy to create chaos, but it's difficult to create harmony. So again, returning to Peterson and his lecture here, those small things, not only are they affecting the world, those small things, not only are they good as a place to begin, but also they're building my self-esteem. And if I focus on small steps forward, I'm actually helping society as well. And also, another aspect is saying I should be careful what I'm thinking about, that we should be manifesting good things and not bad things. So as you can see, there's quite a lot in there. Now, obviously, I'm adding my interpretations. I'm using the circle of influence and circle of concern. I also threw some tinnitus instinct in there. I think if Jordan Peterson was to see this video, he would probably either concur or it wouldn't be a million miles away from where he's thinking from. There's a consistency in Jordan Peterson's thinking if you watch his videos and interactions and so on. And basically, the consistency is the idea of society has been created over thousands of years. Human beings have created it by incrementally improving. We should incrementally improve our lives and incrementally improve society. And of course, I added that interpretation about tinnitus, but I think it's a fair point because nihilism, again, is something that he touches on, is a risk in present-day society. I mean, you know, it can ruin a life by being too negative, and also can ruin a society if too many people get stuck in this sort of death dive of the tinnitus instinct. Certainly that's how I interpret it. How do you interpret it? I think it's certainly an interesting lecture that he was making, and we can interpret it multiple ways. But it's always good, I think, when we look at Jordan Peterson, to think that he's always talking not just about the individual, but he's talking about the individual and society. And something as similar as starting small and building up, like tidy your room, can make a big difference to your life. And if enough people start with those basics, it can make a big difference to society in general. Hope you liked the video. Please like and subscribe if you do, and talk to you next time.